When we think of survival fires, we often think of a fire that will generate heat throughout the night that will enable us to maintain our core body temperature. It's probably the #1 reason why people die in the wilderness, is they're not able to maintain their body heat. So to build a fire that helps you to maintain your core body temperature throughout the night is absolutely essential. And we think about Swedish torches, and we think about something like the long log fire. Oh, these pants are tight. So many base layers on. So I'm going to put a long log fire lay here in front of my survival shelter to show you how you can build a fire that will enable you to maintain heat throughout the night. I'm Clarice, welcome to the Live Ready channel. Make no mistake, building a long log fire is actually quite a bit of work. You actually need to go around finding the resources that you need in order to keep this fire going throughout the night. And a long log fire is basically just a fire lay that has really long big logs, preferably hardwood in the middle or at the bottom, so that you're sure that that fire is going to last the night. Now I've got a couple of long logs here. I've also collected a whole lot of pine cones, a stash of pine needles and some pine twigs. I don't have birch bark in the area, so I'm using what I've got that I know is going to create an accelerant fire or a really hot fire. Now it's really important to note that if you are trekking through the wilderness, it's a good idea and good practice to ensure that you always have some dry tinder in your bag so that you can at least get a fire started and dry out some kindling. If you find yourself in a situation where you need to build a long log fire in the first place, it's most likely going to be because you've encountered adverse weather. So what's going to be the result is that all of the resources in the environment are probably going to be wet, and you're going to have some trouble starting that fire. Now pine is a really resinous wood that burns really hot. So if you can get pine cones, those will burn really hot, and that will help you to get your fire going. So let's jump right into it. So to build a long log fire, the first thing I want to do is to create an elevated platform that I can lift my logs off the ground. In order to do that, I need some smaller logs, or even just twigs will work. Now I haven't actually collected those. Hang on a second. I'm going to head off and collect some sticks quickly. Building a fire in the wilderness requires work. So I've got a silky saw that I use to saw wood in the wilderness. I've got a POCKETBOY. It's quite a small little blade, but you can use any other saw that you've got. So the reason I put the logs at the bottom is just to ensure that I'm going to get some ventilation, some air below my big logs. For a long log fire, you want the smaller logs to be at the top and the bigger logs to be at the bottom. So take a big log, put it at what's going to be the bottom. There, another big log. At the bottom. And I'd prefer to keep these two logs close together, as close as possible. And then I'm going to fill in the space between the two logs so that whatever kindling or coals or embers fall through my fire actually ignites these two logs at the same time. Now there's quite a big gap between these two, and I'm just going to space them out and put this log that's got the splice in the middle over the branch there. Now like I said, if you're doing this in the wilderness, it's likely that you've encountered adverse conditions and your wood is all going to be wet. This stuff is soaked. It has snowed here. There's still snow up on the mountains, so it's cold, and I'm expecting more snow later. So this stuff is really wet, but it's going to help me to stay warm. As far as your shelter goes, you want your fire to be 1.5 meters to 2 meters away from your shelter. To fill in the gaps between the logs, I've got a couple of things. Now, like I said, I don't have birch, but what I do have is pine. And because pine is so resinous, it burns like anything. So I'm going to fill these gaps with as many pine cones as I can find, and have myself one serious fire here later. So all of these gaps get filled in with pine cones, and on top of the pine cones I'm going to put a whole lot of pine needles, and I'm going to stash them in between. In between the pine cones and the pine needles, I can also add some kindling. It just helps the fire to catch, especially when it's wet, and you can really just stick it in there, and it basically just creates a conduit for the fire to follow in order to light the bottom logs. And these are all anything between pencil and, like, let's say thumb thickness. So that's the foundation of my long log fire done. I'm going to add another layer to this. It's really important to note that when you're building a fire like this, the embers from that fire, especially in windy conditions, can actually travel. So it is important to note the risk of starting a bushfire or of starting a forest fire. So it's really important to make sure that you're not directly underneath any low-hanging branches, and that there's nothing in the area that's going to catch a light and cause the rest of the environment to be set on fire. Alright, let's start on the next layer. Again, a couple of logs. So I've got a little one here and I've got two bigger ones. Put the bigger ones on first, just like that. This one has seen a previous forest fire, so it is part charred, and I actually want this char to be wherever I'm going to light first. There's still some ice on here. Again, I'm going to stack some pine cones in there. I'm going to put the driest materials where I want to start by lighting my fire. So I'm keeping a little space open here that I can just stick my hand into, and I put some dry materials in there, and I'm going to keep some to just cover the fire as soon as I've got a proper flame. So this is going to stay on the side here. I'll add more kindling. Let's keep that at hand. It always helps to have some materials on hand that you can assist your fire with should you need to get it going. Last but not least, I've got a whole chunk of punkwood over here. So punkwood is basically decomposing or decaying wood, often from a fallen tree or something like that. You'll see it's really soft and crumbly, and it actually burns really easily. So to add that on, especially if you break it down to the interior part, you're going to find really nice dry wood there. Now if this has come from a pine, which it has, there's going to be quite a bit of resin in this, and the resin is going to burn really well as well. So I can use that to help this fire along, and I'm going to keep some of the dry parts around here where I'm going to light my fire. I've always got a dry fire in my bag, or at least some dry tinder. We're going to have to look for that. No tinder. Forgot to pack myself some tinder, but I have a couple of tea bags in here. Let's see if we can light some rooibos tea. Tea bags. These are dry, so we should be able to light that. The other thing that you can do is take a stick, make a nice feather stick out of it, and see if you can get that to light. Alright, let's see. There's some bark over here. Should be able to light that. And then some dried pine needles. Okay, so between the pine needles, the bark, the punkwood, which isn't really tinder, it's more kindling, but it'll help. We'll have to see. Okay. If he presses it really well, should have the best chance. This is also a good time to start thinking of future fires. So if you can conserve your lighter, then absolutely do that. Otherwise, go with the ferro rod. Let's see how we fare. Just going to scrape some of that ferro rod off. Oh, tea bags burn. Okay, knife out the way so you don't injure yourself. And then that dry tinder that I was talking about, just something to feed it, just something to keep it going. Backward. That's it. Just keep on feeding it. Just manage that flame. I can transfer it to my logs and to the rest of my kindling. And as long as it's getting enough oxygen, enough heat, and it's got a fuel that it can burn, obviously this fuel needs to light or to dry out first before it'll light, it's going to burn. And you can see as soon as a pine cone catches the light, we've got flames. So I'm just going to feed it a couple more of those. So my fire is just on time. It's starting to snow a bit again. And I've now got a roaring fire that's going to keep me warm throughout the night. And I can put my last log on here. And that's going to dry out. And as the fire builds, it's going to dry out every single log, and it's going to generate a lot of heat that's going to come right into my shelter. It's important to know how to put out a fire such as this one as well. In our fire triangle, we need three things. We need heat, we need oxygen, which we usually have, but insufficient oxygen will cause your fire to go out. And we also need a fuel that will accept that heat. It specifically needs to be able to accept the heat. So it needs to be in such a state or condition that it will take a spark, that it will burn, it shouldn't be too wet. So when we disrupt that fire triangle by, for example, taking all of the logs apart, we introduce cold air to it and we remove the heat element. And that helps us to put a fire like this out. So if you've got a big fire like this and for whatever reason you need to put it out quickly, be sure to spread the logs out. Make sure that there's nothing in the environment that's going to catch a light, and then what you can do is just try and dissipate all of that heat. If you've got water available, obviously that's a great way to dissipate the heat, and also to remove the oxygen from the fire triangle. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, remember to hit like and subscribe. Follow me on social media, and until the next time, live ready. At the moment this is a lovely fire. Burning like a funeral pyre.